terrific guy, as is Aaron Boone. So we're happy for both of these guys who've had managerial success. Now, you could also say Buddy Bell, who was a big league manager, and his son David. So they are two generations of big league managers. And the same with the Boones, in Bob Boone, who's a big league manager, and Aaron Boone, who now is a big league manager. So those guys, three generations, those two families of baseball players. What is interesting about all of them is they're all position players. The overwhelming majority of times in baseball, when you get a father-son combination, it is a position player and a position player. There are exceptions, of course. For the Indianapolis Indians, Neil Walker played for us for a couple of years, and he's been in the big leagues 9 years now, currently with the Phillies. His father, Tom, pitched in the major leagues for 5 years. And I said, Neil, it's unusual. Your dad was a pitcher and you're a position player. And he said, yes, well, I got my swing from my mom, because his dad wasn't a good hitter. His mom, Carolyn, was a good athlete who attended Purdue, by the way. They're from Pittsburgh. So the other combination, father-son, that position player pitcher involving us is Gary Green, who is an infielder for us in 1993. And his father, Fred, was a pitcher on the world champion 1960 Pittsburgh Pirates. Now, Gary Green, for many years now, has been the Pittsburgh Pirates infield coordinator, and the Pirates are the Indianapolis Indians parent team and have been since 2005. So Gary has talked about Victory Field often as an infielder, working with the infielders, and he has said that playing surface that we have at Victory Field is as good as any. It is so good, and those infielders love those nice, smooth surfaces. So that's one of the many things about Victory Field that we're proud of. So fathers and sons, often the case. Here's a father-son combination that managed against the Indianapolis Indians, and that is Billy Gardner Sr., who played in the big leagues for about 10 years, and then his son, most recently, Billy Gardner Jr., managing Syracuse in our league just a couple of years ago. Now, Billy Gardner Sr. managed the Omaha Royals against the Indianapolis Indians, and then he got to the big leagues. He got to the big leagues as a manager with the Minnesota Twins. Now, the Twins at that time in the early 1980s were not the most financially secure organization. They watched their money very carefully, so much so that here was Billy Gardner managing the Minnesota Twins, and he was living at a Super 8 motel in Minneapolis. And one day, a truck plowed into that Super 8 motel. And it was all over the news, and people connected with the Twins in baseball knew that's where Billy Gardner was living, and they were really concerned. So the next day, Billy got to the ballpark, and people said, Billy, are you okay? He said, well, yes, I'm okay, but that Super 8 motel is now a Super 7 motel. Where's the laugh track? Okay, I know everybody's muted. But anyway, Billy Gardner had a good sense of humor too, and it pays to have a sense of humor during these times. You know, Dean Traynor managed the Indianapolis Indians from 2011 to 2016, did a wonderful job. We won the division in 2012, 2013, 2015. Prior to becoming our manager, Dean was an undercover narcotics officer, and he saved somebody's life as a manager of the Indianapolis Indians, one of his players. You see, in baseball, there are some unwritten rules. When you have a big lead, there are 3 unwritten rules. Late in a game, when you have a big lead, you don't steal bases, you don't swing at 3-0 pitches, and you don't bunt. You don't do those 3 things. Well, the Indianapolis Indians a few years ago were playing in Toledo, and we had a 10-run lead, a 10-run lead in the ninth inning, and our infielder, Alan Hansen, who was on first, tried to steal second base. Well, that will infuriate the opposition. Dean Traynor, our manager, was coaching third base, and what he did, he aired Alan Hansen out across the diamond so everybody with the Toledo Mud Hens could hear that, and there was no uncertain terms about the way Dean felt about what Alan had done, and he aired him out to such a point that the Mud Hens felt they didn't have to retaliate. So that was a very good thing for Alan Hansen that Dean handled it the way he did. Well, as I said, we're hopeful that we play ball, and I think if and when we do play, we'll have a pretty good team. And that would have been the case had we started April 9th. I was scheduled to speak April 9th on opening day. And what's interesting about the look of the Indianapolis Indians now is that we have a number of veteran players who are still young that were with us during last season. Now, for instance, let's start with Ke'Bryan Hayes. Ke'Bryan Hayes, our fine third baseman, has won 3 straight Gold Glove awards in the minor leagues for fielding excellence. That's incredible because it's not just in our league. That means he's the best fielding third baseman in all of minor league baseball. And his father, Charlie Hayes, was a major league third baseman for 14 years. So there's another father-son combination. So I talked to Ke'Bryan mostly every day last season, always enjoyed speaking with him. And I said to him once, why do you think you've become such a good fielder? And when you go to Victory Field and watch him, watch the way he fields a ground ball or any really good infielder. Their hands are so soft and so quiet, and that the ball just nestles in their glove. And remember, too, when you field a ground ball, that you're first getting your body in position. And in fact, some people like Gary Green, the infield coordinator, will say you're fielding a ground ball with your legs, in that you're getting your body in position first. So here's Ke'Bryan, this terrific fielder. And I said, Ke'Bryan, why do you think you're such a good fielder? He said, because when I was young, my dad said, remember, your defense is just as important as your offense. And I think that's a wonderful thing and a wonderful approach Ke'Bryan has, because, you know, you think about hitting, and they say it's a hitter's Hall of Fame. So you think about those things, and here's a guy who took such pride in his defense. He got off fairly slowly at the plate, and his hitting improved in the second half of the season. So Ke'Bryan Hayes has a chance to be a very good major league third baseman for many years, and we certainly hope he does that. So that's a lesson for youngsters too, to work on their defense. It's fun to hit, but it can be fun to field also. Our shortstop, and Ke'Bryan with us last year, our shortstop also was with us last year, and Cole Tucker figured to be our shortstop again this year. He's a guy with great energy, great enthusiasm. It's always a joy to watch him play. Now, he's a switch hitter. What is interesting, though, about that is that almost every switch hitter is a natural right-hand hitter. But in Cole's case, he's a natural left-hand hitter. The only natural left-hand hitter, and I've broadcast the Indians games for 44 years, the only natural left-hand hitter we've ever had who became a switch hitter was Razor Shines. So it's an and Razor, by the way, came back to our ballpark this past summer. It was wonderful to see him again, the most popular player in the history of the franchise. So it's so unusual to have a left-hand hitter, a switch hitter who's a natural left-hand hitter. So I said to I said to Cole, why did you become a switch hitter when you're a natural left-hand hitter? He said, simply because Jose Reyes was a switch hitter and I looked up to him. And then Cole shook his head. But he has a chance to be a good big league player, homer in his first major league game for the Pirates, and terrific work ethic, excellent shortstop, working to improve his hitting, and I think will do just that. And it's really fun when you have those two guys, which we had last year, most of the season, and we figure to have this year, Cole Tucker at short, keep Brian Hayes at third, you really have something special in your infield. I think the first baseman who was with us last year was Will Craig, and he will be back again, and he's a definite prospect too. And Will Craig is a guy who has power and has worked on his game defensively, has a good attitude. Now, he may feel that he's blocked a bit with Josh Bell, a former Indianapolis Indian, as the Pirates' incumbent at first base. And Will might be, but you never know what can happen. He's worked a bit in the outfield. Trades sometimes are made. The main thing for every one of these players is not to concern themselves with what goes on in Pittsburgh or the parent team. And I've seen this over the years. Guys get so wrapped up about what the parent team is thinking. When am I going to get called up? And the main thing for a player to do is to say, what can I do today to improve my game? How can I be the best possible player that I can be at all times? And then if I do that, the rest will take care of itself. That will take care of itself. See, a lot of guys will talk about, I got to get to the major leagues. I got to get to the big leagues as quickly as possible. Well, that should not be a player's goal. A player's goal should be the best, to become the best possible player that he can be, and then he'll get a chance to go to the big leagues because of that. And even though we may lose a good player, we like to see players get promoted to Pittsburgh and go to the big leagues. But when they do, we want them to stay. We want them to stay and to be there for good. And if they're rushed, they sometimes don't stay and they lose their confidence. So you don't like to see players rush to the major leagues, although with injuries sometimes you have no choice. So ideally, we like to see, and that was the case with Cole Tucker last year when he went to the big leagues when there was an injury up there. So ideally, what we'd like to see, not only going from Indianapolis to Pittsburgh, but also Double-A Altoona to Indianapolis, we'd like to see a player dominate at a level and then get promoted. Dominate at a level for a period of time to show he's really done really well. And the other thing that's important, occasionally you have a guy that does so well, he'll just rise so quickly and go to the big leagues, and he really hasn't encountered any kind of failure. And baseball is a game of failure. It is such a difficult game to play. The skills of hitting and pitching are so challenging. So that even if you're a Hall of Fame baseball player, and we're thrilled that Larry Walker, who played for us in 1989, will be inducted into baseball's Hall of Fame later this year. Even if you're a Hall of Fame baseball player, you're still going to have challenges. You're still going to have to deal with failure at times in the major league level. And what can happen is, if you get to the big leagues so quickly, and again, this doesn't happen, usually doesn't happen, but if you get there without any trials and tribulations in the minor leagues, you may not be able to handle it when you get to the big leagues and first deal with failure. So we like to see guys have their share of challenges, deal with failure in the minor leagues, because that gives them a frame of reference so that when they get to the big leagues, they'll know how to handle it. So Kevin Kramer could very well be our second baseman again. He's played for us the past few years. He's a UCLA guy. In fact, played in a national championship college baseball team at UCLA, a left-hand hitter, terrific golfer too. And he's a guy who is a good player and has a chance to be a major league player. He's been up and back, but he hasn't stayed there for an extended period of time yet. So we'll see what happens. I think our catcher probably will be Christian Kelly again. And Christian's a wonderful guy. Was disappointed he didn't get the call to the major leagues last year in September when the Pirates called up Steve Barron. Christian does a really good job with the pitching staff. And, you know, he was not a high draft pick. And I said to him, what would you have done had you not gone into professional baseball? And he said, I would have become a dentist. And he still might do that when his playing days are over, but a really good guy, works very well with the pitching staff. We got great leadership from Jake Elmore. Jake Elmore, veteran player, played for us last year, got some time with Pittsburgh last year, played against us before that. Terrific guy. When you have a veteran player like that, you want to see him display leadership. You want to see him have a good attitude, and Jake does all those things. Jake's gotten some time in the big leagues. In fact, several years ago, in the same game when he was with the Houston Astros, he was both a pitcher and a catcher in the same game. And neither of those are his positions. He's an infielder, outfielder. But he actually pitched and caught in an extra inning game. And I said, how did you feel afterward? And he said, boy, was my body sore. You know, if you're not used to pitching, and then all of a sudden you pitch an inning, it'll take a lot out of you. And the same, obviously, catching takes a lot out of you too. There are catchers sometimes, I see them working, it's 90 degrees, it's 95 degrees, they've got all that equipment on, and they sometimes look up and they see, besides the pitcher, those 7 other guys in the field are standing there, and I'm working so hard. So Jake Elmore is a really good guy to have on the ball club. I think when we look at the outfield, I think that Jason Martin will be one of the outfielders. Jason Martin is a guy who we got in the trade from the Houston Astros in the Garrett Cole trade, and he is a good player, very good outfielder, working to improve his hitting, and he got some time in the major leagues with Pittsburgh this past year. So we wish Jason Martin the best of luck, and chances are he will be back here in the outfield. We got a Hoosier on the ball club named Hunter Owen, Evansville Mater Dei, and then Indiana State. And he's a really good guy, and has a good attitude and has worked to improve as a player. We were playing a Sunday afternoon game against at home at Victory Field, and then we had a bus trip to Syracuse overnight after the game to begin a series with the Chiefs the next day. And Hunter Owen, playing first base, got hit in the face with a batted ball, went to the hospital, got several stitches, and there he was on the bus going to Syracuse that night. And I was really impressed that he had that kind of attitude, that he wanted to be there, and he did play in the next couple of days after that. In fact, the unusual thing is he was one of the first, and he had, you know, his face covered up because of the stitches. He was one of the first players to check into the hotel. And the woman at the front desk took a look at Hunter and said, I didn't realize a hockey team was coming in here tonight. So, but Hunter is a really good guy and is really a welcome addition to our ball club. So there are a lot of players. I look at the pitching staff. And by the way, one other Indiana State note, I mentioned Hunter, and we had a period in the 1980s, and that was a decade in which the Indianapolis Indians won 6 championships. But we had a decade where we had 3 guys from Indiana State play for us and were major contributors. Wally Johnson, who was a switch hitter, and he ended up getting a lot of time in the big leagues as a pinch hitter with the White Sox and played for the Expos. Terrific guy, now a CPA from Gary. And Dick Raventine, right-handed pitcher who these days is very successful in business. And Tim Barrett, another right-handed pitcher who still lives in Indiana. And all 3 of these guys, Indiana State guys, and they were key contributors to that run in the 1980s. You see, there was such a wonderful attitude among those ball clubs and among a lot of winning clubs in the minor leagues, where Yes, we know everybody wants to get to the major leagues as players, but the attitude should be, if we do our jobs properly, if we improve as players, the big leagues will take care of themselves. And they did for those guys. So that was very impressive. I look at our pitching staff this year, and I think James Marvel will probably be back. He's a Duke guy, and he's a guy who came out of nowhere and just shot through the minor leagues. And he doesn't have the greatest stuff, but boy, is he competitive. Is he smart? He's got so much going for him that he went all the way up and he got to the major leagues with the Pittsburgh Pirates last year. He throws strikes, he competes, he mixes things up, and he has great baseball awareness. So it was a pleasure to be around James Marvel, and we look forward to seeing him as well back. JT Brubaker is a guy who I think would have had a terrific year last year. He pitched for us part of the year before. Unfortunately, after just a few starts, JT came down with an injured arm and he missed almost all of the season. He's healthy now, and he's a guy I think the world of. He competes well, he's smart, he's self-confident, and I think JT Brubaker has a chance to be a very good major league pitcher, and he will be with the Indianapolis Indians if and when we play. I think we'll have Montana DiRappo back in the bullpen. Montana DiRappo is not a flamethrower, but he has several different pitches from several different angles. And you may be saying, well, is he from the state of Montana with a first name Montana? And the answer is no. What happened is when his mom was pregnant with him, she was reading a book about the state of Montana, which she thought was wonderful. And he got the first name Montana. Cody Ponce, a hard-throwing pitcher we got in a trade last year, could be with us and probably will be. Left-handed pitcher from Colorado named Blake Wyman, who I like a great deal, competes well, really good guy. He figures to be with us. His season was shortened due to some shoulder issues last year, but here's another guy I think that could be very helpful to us. Another guy who came on the scene late, who impressed people, came on the Indianapolis Indians scene late last year and impressed the Pirates in spring training this year, was Blake Cederland, right-handed pitcher, a relief pitcher. He has a really good arm, and they look for good arms in this day and age. They look for power pitchers, and that's what he's all about. He's about strikeouts. So he's another guy who could be with us as well. Cam View, left-handed starter from Michigan. I think good chance he'll be with us too. So that's a rundown of what I think we'll have of many of the players who will be here. One thing to note, and this is how the game has changed, in that from a pitcher's perspective, it used to be, and I'd say even until just 4 or 5 years ago, the sinker was a truly great pitch. It's a fastball. It's also called a two-seam fastball that naturally sinks. When you rip a ball with two seams, or with the seams, it used to be called years ago, as opposed to all four seams and across the seams. With the seams, the ball tends to sink. Across the seams, a four-seamer, the ball tends to ride a bit if you have good velocity. So you can throw harder with a four-seam fastball than you can with a sinking fastball generally. But the sinker has a lot of movement. The four-seamer was straight. But players were always encouraged, if they had the ability, to throw a sinker, unless they were a really power pitcher. But it was more like pitching back then, as opposed to just throwing as hard as you could. So you get into a situation where the sinker was a great pitch. First pitch, what better is there for a defense than seeing a first pitch ground ball hit to shortstop or second base with the sinker? Perfect. With the sinker, you get a lot of ground balls. Well, what's changed is this, that because of launch angle and players trying to lift the ball and uppercut with their swings. The sinker is not as an effective pitch as it used to be because you want to keep a sinker low. So now the hitter's trying to golf a ball with his launch angle. He's so concerned with that. So hitters have become better low ball hitters than they were. And because of that, the sinker is not as effective. Now, it still can be effective at times. The philosophy of the Pirates and most organizations until recently was try to induce weak contact, like throw a first pitch sinker, maybe on the handle of the bat or off the end of the bat, try to induce contact that's weak. But now, because of the change, it is try to miss bats, try to strike people out. So pitchers are throwing the four-seamer more across the seams, and they're throwing it higher in the strike zone because that pitch is more effective since these hitters are trying to golf the ball all the time. So that four-seam fastball is really effective. And that's what happens now. And you have so many strikeouts. And by the way, I don't think that's good. I think that's an issue. I want to see balls put in play, singles, doubles, triples. Last year with the ball more lively, you had all these home runs. Give you an example. In April of 2018, the Indianapolis Indians hit 6 home runs as a team. In April of 2019, with the ball being the major league ball, which the seams are tighter and carries farther, and not only was it the major league ball, but it was a ball that was more lively, gravitational pull, we hit over 30 home runs in the month of April in 2019. So 6 in 2018, over 30 in 2019 in April, because of 2 things, going to the major league ball and a more lively major league ball. So that is one of the ways the game has changed. In just a moment, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have. But talking about it earlier, we just don't know. We're hopeful of playing ball. We'll see. There's also some encouraging news. The major leagues and minor leagues have an agreement with each other, and it's called the player development contract. You know, the major leagues furnish the players to us, obviously, and to minor league teams. Well, they had a very constructive meeting yesterday, and both sides came out and said that we had a constructive meeting and we're working toward getting a new agreement with baseball. The current agreement expires at the end of 2020, so at the end of this season. So they've been negotiating and talking on and off all winter. Victory Field will have a beautiful new club called the Elements Financial Club, and it'll be done and ready to go if and when we play. And it is absolutely sensational. It'll be the same level as the suite level, 3rd floor. And so we're looking forward to that. That'll be terrific. And Victory Field is such a wonderful ballpark. And we know we get comments from people saying that new Indians ballpark, because it looks so new. And the Indianapolis Indians deserve so much credit for that. Randy Lewandowski and his crew, because of the fact that they work so hard and they spend money with upgrading the ballpark. And I can tell you, you know, I travel with the club and I broadcast the road games live. I can tell you that if you don't work on maintaining a ballpark, when it gets 7 to 10 years old, it will decay if you don't work at it. So here, Victory Field opened July 11th, 1996. And so it'll be, 24 years old on July 11th. It still looks brand new. Max Schumacher did a wonderful thing when negotiating with the CIB, said, we will pay for all the improvements at Victory Field. We'll pay for everything. The Indians do that, and they spend money, and it looks great. And Max handed the reins over to Bruce Schumacher, who's now board chairman and CEO, doing a terrific job. Randy Lewandowski, president and general manager, has shown great leadership. in navigating things with the Indianapolis Indians during this challenging time. So we're hopeful of playing baseball. We'll get it open to you for any questions that you have. And I thought I might do something else too, in that besides the question, if you want to name a player, a baseball player, past or present, and would like me to comment on them, I'm happy to do that. So hopefully there will be baseball at Victory Field. And at this time, let's turn it over to some questions.
Talk about Mickey Mantle.
Howard, where are you? Oh,
The first question was talking about Mickey Mantle, and he was my favorite ball player as a kid growing up. Mickey Mantle had the most natural talent of anybody who ever played the game. He could run so fast. He could hit the ball so far. Great eye-hand coordination, the greatest switch hitter of all time. And he was a great teammate also, played for the Yankees for 18 years. And by the way, Mickey Mantle played against the Indianapolis Indians. In 1951, Mickey, who had just been in the lower minor leagues the year before, had a great spring training. The Yankees trained in Phoenix that year, hitting balls, soaring, and everybody was saying, this guy's the next superstar. And then he struggled a bit, and he lost his confidence. They sent him to AAA Kansas City before Kansas City had Major League Baseball. And so he played there. He started off a little slowly. His dad came over from Oklahoma, had a conversation. Then he started to get going. And he came to Indianapolis, played at our old ballpark, which was known as Victory Field then, Busch Stadium. And he hit home runs from both sides of the plate. And from there, that was it. A couple of days later, he was in the big leagues, 536 home runs, 18 home runs in the World Series, the most of anybody. I was there for number 16, which broke Babe Ruth's record. And he was a phenomenal ball player, one of the all-time greats. Would have been even better had he taken better care of himself. And he certainly did admit that.
Howard, where are the Indians and Pittsburgh players currently? Are they staying at their own homes, or is there a training area where some of them are, but they're recognizing the social distancing?
Most of them are at their own homes, and there was social distancing. The Pirates were right there as far as, hey, we got to be really careful. And before even things got to where they were still being careful about social distancing and doing the best they can. The inherent nature of baseball lends itself to, as opposed to basketball, football, and hockey, where everybody's next to each other on every play, baseball lends itself to a little more social distancing. So that's why one reason we're hopeful of seeing baseball at the major and minor league levels this year. So most of them are at their homes now. I think a few may have stayed in Florida. The Pirates spring training headquarters are in Bradenton, but they were encouraged to go to their homes after we realized this was not going to end quickly.
Howard, I've got a couple questions. The Astros have been in the news quite a bit this past year, and some rulings have come down upon that. I'd be curious of your assessment. I'd also be curious, in your 44 years, if there's something, similar you've seen over the years. We've seen it ourselves with Rotary over the years, doing that type of thing when we've played them. But I'd be curious about your thoughts. And then the second question, there's a relatively new book that came out on our good friend and member Max Schumacher's life and career, and would ask you about your assessment of the book.
Well, I'll get to the book first, since you most recently asked that. I enjoyed that. Now, you might say I was quoted quite frequently throughout the book. So if I tell you I enjoyed it, but I thought it was really well done. Mark Monteith did a wonderful job writing the book with Max. And I sat down with Mark and Max, and they asked me a number of questions, and it was really well done. Max started working for the Indians in 1957, and he is board chairman emeritus now. And he became general manager in 1961. His first 3 years as GM We won 3 straight pennants in 1961, 2, and 3. And so Max thought this is an easy business, but we didn't win another one until 1982. And let me mention one other thing too. I should mention Brian Esposito is back as our manager, and this will be his 3rd year. John Nunnally is our new hitting coach. John Nunnally played for us in 1998, 2004, and 2005. And what's unique about that is that in 1998, the Reds were our parent club. In 2004, Milwaukee was the parent club. And in 2005, Pittsburgh was the parent club. So he is one of 2 players in our franchise history, and our wonderful franchise goes all the way back to 1902. He's one of 2 players to play for us with 3 different parent teams. The other, see if anybody can get it, the other played for us in 1960 when the Phillies were the parent team. 1961, the Reds were the parent team. And 1962, the White Sox were the parent team. An outfielder who lived in Indianapolis after his playing days. Anybody know who I mean?
Razor Shine.
No, Razor played for 2 different parent teams, and he played for us from 1984 to 1993, with the exception of 1990. Lenny Johnson is the man I'm talking about, who played for the 3 different parent teams. Good player too, really good guy too. He could run and was a good player. Also, part of your question was about the Houston Astros. I think it was terrible with what they did. You know, if a base runner is leading off second and he can detect the sign from a catcher and let a hitter know by possibly putting his hand on his head or putting his hands on his hips, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But what they did electronically to steal signs was terrible, really was. And they were really disliked. And I think who knows what would have happened in terms of that dislike displaying itself throughout ballparks all summer. And then, of course, the pandemic came and then people stopped talking about that. But that was a terrible thing. Was that did I answer your question thoroughly?
You did. The only other aspect was, had you seen anything comparable in your time in the International League?
Oh, no. Nothing like the Astros thing. Nothing like that. Now, you have had, the steroid era was bad. I did see some pitchers say, I would rather face a hitter on steroids than face a hitter who knew what pitch was coming. And that's fastball, breaking ball, changeup. And that's what the Astros sign stealing was all about. When hitters know what's coming, not all hitters, but the overwhelming majority of hitters, when they know what's coming, it's very advantageous to them. In fact, quick story there. When I first started, and many of you who were here in the 70s and 80s remember the Cincinnati Reds in the late 60s too, coming for the annual exhibition game. It was such a big night. And so many of those Reds were former Indianapolis Indians, having played for us. We worked together from 1968 to 1983. Well, so I'm calling the game. It was June 20th, 1974, my first year. I'm thrilled to say Pete Rose, Johnny Bench, Joe Morgan, Tony Perez. Johnny Bench comes up and hits a home run. And the Indianapolis Indians win the game. It didn't rain. It poured 5 minutes from the ballpark, but it didn't rain. And Max Schumacher said that made up for all the bad luck I've ever had in my life, not raining that day and canceling the game. But after the game, I'm in the Indians clubhouse, and I'm talking to our catcher, Sonny Roberto, who went on to play for us for 6 years and live here for a number of years. And Sonny said to me, what did you think of Johnny Bench hitting that home run? And I said, I thought it was great. The fans came to see it. They're happy the Indianapolis Indians won the game, but they came to see Johnny Bench hit a home run. He said, I agree. Now, I'll tell you what happened. I told Johnny Bench a fastball was coming. Going back to the Astros thing, I let him know. And Johnny Bench was one of those guys, if he knew a fastball was coming, he'd clobber it, and he did for a home run. So Sonny said everybody was happy with one exception. The pitcher, Pat Zachary, who gave up the home run, and Zach doesn't have to know that I told Johnny what was coming. Yes, any other questions?
I just want to say, every year I hear you speak, Howard, I'm more impressed with how your knowledge of baseball in the whole, and particularly the Indianapolis Indians. And I want to thank you for all your time.
Well, that's very nice of you to say that. We have a wonderful history, one that goes back to 1902. Now, we haven't won a championship in a while. It's been since 2000. This is the ring that we got in 2000, and we haven't gotten one since then. So we're due for a championship. From 1986 through 2000, those 15 years, if you can believe that, we only had 2 losing seasons, 1990 and 93. So we came very close to winning a championship in 2015, came down to the finals game to win the championship, the Governor's Cup. So we were hoping this would be the year. Maybe it still will be. And we've had a lot of great players. And the important thing to always remember, and I think most fans do that, is also, yes, you want to win, but enjoy the Victory Field experience. It's a beautiful ballpark, and these players are playing hard. They're trying to get to the major leagues, and everything means so much to them.
Great. Thank you.
Howard, you mentioned the Elements Financial Club. I think everybody's going to be surprised at how it looks because they took out everything behind home plate, and it is now a club level open bar kind of situation for the millennials, I think, more than anybody else. But it really will have a spectacular view of the field and the city, and it'll be open. But it will also be the kind of place where you can go for cover on rainy days and on very hot days. So I think it's going to get a lot of traction.
I think you're right. Is this Mary, by the way?
Yes.
I can't see you, but I recognize your voice. Mary Marsh, who's a member of our board, does a wonderful job. I think that you're right, and Elements Financial Club will be open to both groups and individuals. So one person could go and big groups can go too.
Howard, this is Pat McCrory, and I just have a question. Part of me says, and I'm a lawyer by trade, that I think businesses are going to need to be proactive on suggesting to the governor how they reopen and get that plan approved. Have you thought about that? And I say this because there are a couple of things. I have 2 horses, and my stable, and I have a right to ride them, but my stable is closed down and won't let me ride them till May 1st. But we're working on plans about how we'll have individual lessons and that type of thing so that we'll meet the governor's criteria. Same thing with gyms, et cetera, that I belong to. So I just was wondering what you guys are, thinking about or maybe putting together.
Well, again, we're still in a wait and see situation right now. It's still wait and see, but I would think that if the opportunity presents itself, and hopefully it does, yes, the Indians will have a plan. That's something that the front office, we mentioned Bruce Schumacher, Randy Lewandowski, Joe Zawacki, Matt Gay, they all come together. I'm sure they're discussing things. And the main thing is, and this is the same in the major leagues who are talking about playing before empty stadiums in the beginning. There are all kinds of discussions right now, but first, to do anything, you have to get the go-ahead. So we're not in that situation yet, nor are the major leagues yet.
Howard, this is David Cease.
Hi, David.
As was said earlier, we appreciate so much how you come year after year. Share a little bit of the story that you tell on how you approached Max and how you ended up coming to the Indians. That's a great story. A little bit about your background and how you ended up in Indianapolis.
Well, I was in my senior year of college. I had broadcast St. John's basketball games. Brooklyn College was the school I attended. I was in my senior year that fall. I had broadcast St. John's basketball on radio the previous spring, my junior year, and that's before the Big East, by the way. So St. John's is in the 70s. St. John's wasn't as popular, nor was college basketball back then in New York, but the Big East really changed that. But in any event, I wrote a letter to every minor league team. Now, these are wonderful times for a lot of minor league teams, like the Indianapolis Indians. You know, we drew a little under 600,000 fans last year. We've drawn over 600,000 many years. Back then, the Indianapolis Indians drew under 130,000 fans for the whole season. So those were not great times for the minor leagues. There were about 110 minor league teams. I wrote a letter to every one of them telling them I have an interest in broadcasting their games if there was an opening. Of the 110 letters, I got about 25 responses. And I must admit, I was a bit naive. I figured the letters were being lost in the mail. That's why I didn't hear back from more people. But of the 25 responses, there were 3 openings: Albuquerque, Spokane, and Indianapolis. I sent each of them an inning of play-by-play from a Yankee Red Sox game I had done from a Yankee broadcast booth. I had written to George Steinbrenner, who had just bought the Yankees, and he let me use vacant broadcast booths to practice my play-by-play. And from a Yankee Red Sox game, turned out Albuquerque wanted a full-time sports director, so that wasn't a fit. Spokane had an interest in me, but before they acted, Max Schumacher called me and said, "Come on out." And it was mid-February, and he hired me. And he told me that he and Judge Pat Sullivan, also a member of the board, they went over the tapes. And I sent him actually a reel-to-reel tape. Cassettes were starting to come into play back then. And I still remember it. Thurman Munson got a base hit to knock in the 1 run. Yankee announcer Frank Messer said, "All you have to do is send an inning." So that's what I did, the 8th inning of this particular game at Yankee Stadium. And it's been wonderful, and I've been here ever since, and I've been very fortunate because I've been able to live my dream here.
Great story, Howard. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Howard, again, on behalf of the club, really want to thank you for joining us today. And we are going to be making a donation in your name to Teachers Treasures, which helps teachers by obtaining and distributing school supplies throughout Marion County. So again, appreciate you doing this on an annual basis. We hope baseball will resume soon, and we also hope you'll join us next year as well. So again, really appreciate your time today.
Well, thanks to all of you so much. It's always an honor to speak before this club. And, you know, I know what Max meant to the club and what the club meant to Max, and he brought me here several times before I started speaking. So it's wonderful, and I wish all of you good health and hopefully see you at Victory Field.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Also a reminder, we are going to have Randy Mobley speak to us in June. So that will be, I think, a treat as well. In wrapping up, a couple of last announcements. The Kiwanis convention slated for Indy, unfortunately, it was announced yesterday, will be canceled. So if anybody was attending that, I apologize, but that is going to be canceled. Next week, we've got Angela Buckman, who is a meteorologist. She's going to join us. And then again, we've lined up some really good speakers for you in May. We wished Rob Schlegel a happy birthday. He celebrated yesterday. I also see Gary Gardner on the call, who celebrated the birthday Tuesday. Both of those young men progressing in their 40s. So happy birthday to both of you guys. And in closing, again, thinking about Joe Marba, just a thought. Let's continue to bring Joe's spirit, continue with Joe's spirit in the weeks, days, months ahead, because he inspired us all. And let's honor his memory with our continued service to the community. So wishing you all a great week. I continue to really be proud of our club and what we're doing. And as always, let me know what I can do better, and Godspeed and onward.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye. See you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.